Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and then there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain thousands of years of memories and also a thread of the modern future.
I like to use every minute and just get out and hop on the ferry and just go from the Asian side to the European side and just enjoy the wonderful weather with the wonderful Bosphorus behind me and just enjoying the moment of Istanbul.
Istanbul is very beautiful with great culture.
This city is the symbol of diversity. Come and study at Maltepe University.
Come here and feel like you're home.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dilshat Akdağ. I will be the moderator for this section. In this section, you will watch the presentations under the title of Mental and Psychiatric Health in COVID-19. I wish you enjoyable listening. First presentation title is Sleep Disturbances in Russian University Students During COVID-19 Pandemic. I would like to introduce you Selma Abdallah.
Hello, everybody. Just a second. Is it okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Salma Abdallah. I am a first-year medical student from Samara State Medical University. I'm going to present our presentation about sleep disturbances in Russian university student during COVID-19 pandemic. The introduction. First, we found that poor sleep quality has been demonstrated in 57.1% population during COVID-19 pandemic. Researchers hypothesized that fatigue, sleepiness, and REM sleep behavior disorder might be related to SARS-CoV-2 infection per se, whereas insomnia might be related mainly to confinement, anxiety, and other psychosocial factors. Also, we found that mental health of university students has been affected by pandemic. Excess rates of depression in 12.43% and severe distress reaction in 13.46%. So, we aim to study sleep disturbances among the students' population in response to their psychosocial factors of pandemic and social isolation measures across the lockdown. About the methods, by using the Google form, we distributed the anonymous self-administrated questionnaire for estimating the effect of COVID-19 pandemic on mental health among the university students in Samara, Russia. As an initial step, our research team started sending the links to all their contacts from social media like Facebook, Twitter. Then we were asking our contacts across the city to do the same with their contacts, and their contacts do the same. Participation in this study was voluntarily, and this study respected the confidentiality of respondents, and there were no identified risks to the respondents. In this form, we study the socio-demographic measures as gender, family, number of family members, and family environment and relationship in the family during the lockdown, if they changed or worsened. Also, we study anxiety symptoms and fears related to the risk of contraction COVID, and fears that elder family members were at risk of developing severe COVID form. We study also changes of physical training, eating behavior, styles during lockdown as compared to the time before COVID. About the results, we found from population of 1,242 university students, number of females was 940, number of males was 273, and the other was 23, have been characterized by the reduced of quality of sleep in 36.7%, as shown here in the chart. They were much worse by 12.5%. They somehow worse by 24.2%. There were no change by 52.6%, and a little better by 7%. Then we found the respondents tend to stay late and sleep for many hours during the day in 64.6%, as shown in the chart, almost always by 13.2%, often by 21.4%, and sometimes by 30.1%. The respondents reported that in the situation of the lockdown, they used the internet more often in 65.6%, as shown here in the chart, much more time by 17.1%, significantly more time by 25.8%, in a moderate way more time by 22.7%, and in particular 52.7% with number about 654 used social media groups more often. Also, moreover, we found students took sleeping pills from time to time in 8.7% and often in 1.7%, almost always in 0.9%. So, the factor of tendency to stay late was positively correlated with the factor of more often usage of internet during pandemic. However, our precise second stage analysis will report which of the variety of psychosocial factors, including COVID-19 pandemic and social isolation, contributed to these sleep disturbances in students' population. The conclusion: our current study confirmed that students are at risk to develop sleep disorders, which can affect their studies, physical and mental health. University Medical Office is recommended to manage a special program to monitor health indicators, actively promote importance, and provide assistance to those students who experience sleep disturbances. Also taking into account the excessive usage of internet and the mobile device. That's all. I hope you all are fine and stay healthy, stay at home. Thank you.
Thank you for your great presentation. Next presenter is Paul Dorabat. The title is Burnout Syndrome Among Healthcare Professionals from a Romanian Infectious Diseases Hospital During the COVID-19 Pandemic.
is the place to find yourself.
Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and then there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain thousands of years of memories and also a thread of the modern future.
I like to use every minute and just get out and hop on the ferry and just go from the Asian side to the European side and just enjoy the wonderful weather with the wonderful Bosphorus behind me and just enjoying the moment of Istanbul.
Istanbul is very beautiful with great culture.
This city is the symbol of diversity. Come and study at Maltepe University.
Come here and feel like you're home.
Sorry for the technical problem. We will continue the next presenter. Now, I would like to invite Igor Radenko to present their study titled Insomnia During the Covid-19 Pandemic in the Republic of North Macedonia.
Thank you. Can you see me?
Yes, it's okay.
Let me just share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, it's okay. We can start.
Okay. Thank you. So we are representing the medical faculty at the University St. Cyril and Methodius in Skopje. I'm Igor Radenkov and my collaborators Nina Gavrilova and Natasha Mladenovska, and we will be presenting about insomnia during the COVID-19 pandemic in the Republic of North Macedonia. So the COVID-19 pandemic, since its beginning in late 2019, had caused massive global mortality and morbidity, which is only comparable to some other crises such as the Spanish flu. The outbreak not only caused massive mortality and morbidity, but it had a massive effect on the global economy. I believe there's an estimate at about 220 million lost their jobs because of the crisis. So we can only imagine the massive financial losses that they also suffered. But the majority of them are temporary jobs. So when the crisis subsides, it can actually improve and many jobs will be returned, but the crisis is still not over. Apart from that, COVID-related news has become the leading subject in news reporting since the beginning, probably a year and a half, which led to a widespread state of fear among the people. Insomnia is defined as an inability to fall and or stay asleep despite sufficient time and sufficient conditions, no noise, a dark room, etc. It can be defined as acute, short-term, that lasts from one night to a few weeks, or chronic, long-term insomnia that lasts for at least 3 nights a week for 3 months or more. There are many risk factors. In our model and in our study, we wanted to put the emphasis on stress as a risk factor for insomnia. And there are many others, such as female gender, chronic pain, advanced age, night shift work, lifestyle factors, and anxiety and depression disorders. There have been many studies conducted on the effect since the COVID outbreak. The first studies, I believe, were the Chinese. There were a few Chinese studies in the beginning of 2020. In Europe, I believe there's a Greek study, an Italian study, and a French study that also dealt with depression and anxiety disorders during the pandemic. Our aim in our study was to investigate the prevalence of insomnia during the pandemic and how it correlates with various social and economic factors. For that reason, we designed a Google Forms questionnaire that contained 23 questions pertaining about general information about the participants, such as age, gender, employment status, whether they had a partner or not, exposure to SARS-CoV-2, whether it's personal exposure, exposure of a close loved one, maybe a family member, a friend, past medical history, such as past medical history of somatic illness and anxiety and depression, and the global and the effect that the virus had on the participants' life, such as financial aspect, job security, etc. It lasted for 7 days. The questionnaire was open for 7 days, from the 27th of March to the 3rd of April, 2021. And it was distributed through the smartphone applications Viber and Messenger, through various groups of individuals who were exposed to the virus. And they were encouraged to send the questionnaire to other individuals who also were exposed in a snowball sampling method. The inclusion criteria were literacy, willing consent, owning a smartphone with an internet connection, and installed Viber and Messenger applications. Exclusional criteria were not understanding the study and its contents and not the answering every single question. So everyone who answered, who excluded even one question, were not taken in consideration. The insomnia was diagnosed with a translated version of the ISI, or the Insomnia Severity Index, which contains 7 questions pertaining to difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, waking up too early, and whether the individual was satisfied with their sleep, whether it interfered with daily living, how noticeable it was to other people around them, how worried are they about the problem, on a grading scale from 0 to 4. So the full score is 28. From 0 to 7, there is no presence of insomnia. 8 from 14 is subclinical insomnia. 15 to 21 is moderately severe clinical insomnia, and from 22 to 28 is a severe form of clinical insomnia. So by this definition, everyone who had a score equal or greater than 8, we classified as insomnia. With the data that we collected, we performed descriptive analysis, then created 2 groups, an insomnia group and a control group of non-insomnia, and lastly, we performed multiple binary logistic regression. The results were as follows. 195 participants answered all of the questions, and that was the number of participants. 63 of them, or 36.2%, met the criteria for insomnia according to the ICI, and out of those, 41 had subthreshold insomnia, or 21% of all of them. Clinical insomnia, there was 20 individuals, or 10.3%, and a severe type of clinical insomnia was 2 or 1% of the participants. The statistical analysis showed that individuals who had insomnia were more likely to be female, They were more likely to belong in the age groups from 19 to 30 and 31 to 50. The majority of them were employed during the pandemic. About 30% of them were medical workers, such as doctors, nurses, residents. Pre-existing somatic chronic illnesses, there were only 17%, which could be explained by the lack of participants over 65 years of age, because the internet is predominantly a medium of the younger generations. 16% almost used sleep aid medication or supplements. 14% had past history of anxiety disorder, and past history of depression, almost 24%. In terms of the effect on the virus on the participants' life during the pandemic, 34%, almost 35%, contracted the virus. Exposure of a family member or friend to the virus, it was almost 2/3 of the whole participant body, and loss of a job during the pandemic, only 12%. Loss of household income, almost 35%. Having a partner during the pandemic, 65% had a partner. Increased workload, 2/3 of all of the participants had increased obligations at work. And pertaining the information of COVID, the majority of them were exposed often and very often to COVID-related information, with the majority of them getting their information from the internet. The multiple binary logistic regression showed significant correlation with 4 parameters: loss of household income during the pandemic, not having a partner during the pandemic, exposure of a family member or a friend to the virus, and a slightly weaker correlation with employment status because of the very wide confidence interval. There were several limitations to the study. Lack of participants over the age of 65. As I said, the internet is a medium predominantly of the younger generations. It was also a self-reported study, which included the ICI as the only measuring tool for the presence of insomnia. It was also conducted in a very short time frame of 7 days, and the majority of the participants were from Skopje. But then again, the majority of COVID cases were in Skopje, over 70% around North Macedonia, so that's not such a drawback. In terms of the economic aspect, we found significant correlation between loss of income during the pandemic and insomnia prevalence, which could be explained with the fact that in a relatively weak economy like North Macedonia, the majority of the economy is based around small businesses in manual labor, such as textile workers, craftsmen, who in normal situations have low wages, long working hours, a lot of the time night shift with very bad working environments. And when you add COVID to that equation, that can increase stress, which can also lead to insomnia in these workers. In the workplace aspect, we also have cited numerous studies that found that increased workload over a short amount of period of time increases stress and therefore can alter the sleep cycle and cause insomnia. This was also especially prevalent in manual workers, and it was much weaker in medical workers. The explanation for this could be that either doctors and nurses or medical staff have built up resilience over the years with their medical training to stress, or maybe the medical schools select for individuals who have higher stress tolerance and more robust coping mechanisms. The social aspect also had consistency with other studies that showed that constant worry about the pandemic showed correlation with presence of insomnia. We found a significant correlation about worrying about the state of a friend or a family member who was infected or exposed with the virus, or some of them unfortunately passed away. This was especially prevalent with the older population over 65 years of age, because a lot of people lost their grandparents, parents, but there was also a good amount of the mortality of COVID in the age group under 65 years of age, and those were predominantly individuals who had chronic illnesses such as diabetes, asthma, and etc. And this constant worry probably elevates the stress hormones, which impacts the sleep cycle of these individuals. And the last aspect between which we found significant correlation was not having a partner during the pandemic and insomnia. In the first few months of the pandemic in North Macedonia, there were massive lockdowns, and the same as in every country around the world, which impacted normal social life immensely, especially for the youngest population and the oldest population, who tend to be more involved in that social life. And especially if individuals did not have a partner before the lockdown further compromised their ability to seek out a partner, which could lead to depression, which we know that can alter the sleep cycle and cause insomnia. So to conclude, our study found that almost 1/3 of the population suffered insomnia symptoms since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in the Republic of North Macedonia. Risk factors included the loss of a job, lowering of the total household income, and exposure to the virus of a friend or relative to the participant. These results, we believe, prompt effective interventions conducted in a timely manner in the treatment of insomnia in the high-risk group, such as individuals suffering from financial losses during the pandemic, overworked individuals, individuals with little social contact. And first frontline therapy of this condition is CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which apart from classical cognitive behavioral therapy, includes disciplines such as sleep hygiene, promotion of a healthy lifestyle, and training oneself to function under sleep restriction. We thank you for your attention, and we will give way to the next presenter.
Thank you to Mr. Radenkov and his friends for this great presentation. Next presentation title is Relations between Psychosomatic Stress Response and Gender in the Context of COVID-19 Pandemic. I would like to invite Rekut.
Hi everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation to take part in this conference. And today I'm going to be talking about the relations between psychosomatic stress response and gender in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. This was a research paper we did together with my colleague Yevil Goskayda. I'm the one presenting it here today. So the aim of our research was to analyze scientific research papers on the links between biological gender and symptoms of stress, to examine the connection between biological gender and stress-related symptoms, and to evaluate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the students of Vilnius University. Our research consisted of two parts. The first one is a review of literature. For this part, we chose 9 scientific papers that we found using such keywords as gender differences, stress response, and psychosomatic symptoms. And the second part was a survey, which we conducted with 215 students of Vilnius University. And the survey consisted of 9 separate questions. Now, for the third part, we compared the results. On to the review of literature. We found that there is a consensus among authors that corticotropin-releasing factor and its receptors are the main cause of sexual dimorphisms of stress response. Now, because of the different density and localization of these receptors, women are more likely to feel psychosomatic symptoms and experience mood-related disorders, for example, anxiety and depression. In men, these receptors are highly related to cognitive functions, and therefore we much more often see such behaviors as aggressive behavior, addiction, and schizophrenia in male individuals. Now, when it comes to COVID-19 pandemic, It is no secret that this pandemic, as well as all the other pandemics that we have seen in the world in the past centuries, have had an impact on the workers and especially on the healthcare workers. And we have seen an increase in the rates of anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and insomnia among these workers and students. Now, the survey that we conducted, we did with 215 students of Vilnius University. Among them, 155 were female, 60 were males, and the average age of the respondents was 20.51 years. There was no significant difference between the genders in this part. Now, our survey consisted of 4 parts. The first one regarded personal information such as the age and the gender of the respondents. The second one regarded stress. We asked the respondents whether they thought that stress had an impact on their physical health and whether they feel stress more often than 3 times a week or less often. In the third part, we asked the respondents to choose the symptoms of stress that apply to them. We gave them a list of 17 different symptoms. And in the fourth part, we asked the respondents whether they thought that COVID has had an impact on the stress they are feeling. Now, all of these answers were analyzed using the SPSS software version 20. Now, what we found, the first question shouldn't come as a surprise at all. We found that 95.8% of those surveyed declared that stress was a determinant for their physical health. Now, more men than women did not think that there was a connection between stress and their physical health. We found this to be statistically significant. However, we also saw that men tended to feel more psychosomatic symptoms of stress in the terms of frequency. More than half of them stated that they felt symptoms of stress more than 3 times a week. Now, on average, the respondents mentioned feeling 6.5 different symptoms of stress out of 17 available. And out of those, most frequently chosen were heart palpitations, insomnia, fatigue, and headache. We can see that the distribution of number of symptoms chosen is almost normal, but there is a shift towards lower values. Now, if we look at these results by gender, we can see that women tended to choose a wider variety and more symptoms than men. Women on average chose 7.21 different symptoms, while men only chose 4.68 different symptoms. We made a conclusion that men on average chose 2.53 symptoms less than their counterparts, and we found this to be statistically significant. It is also very well illustrated in the forest plot on the slide. The most common symptoms among men and women, well, in the top 3, they were mostly the same. They were heart palpitations, insomnia, and fatigue. Now, the biggest difference when it came to the different symptoms people were feeling was in symptoms that regarded the gastrointestinal tract. You can see here that changes in appetite ranked the 4th place among women and the 6th place among men. Nausea ranked as the 6th most common symptom among women, as the 7th among men, while diarrhea was not even in the top 10 most common symptoms among men. All of these symptoms that regarded the gastrointestinal tract were 2 times more likely to be chosen by women, as women chose them much more often and with greater variety, while men tended to stay away from symptoms like these. Now, on to the part where we asked the respondents how they felt about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has impacted their lives. 61.2% of all respondents said that they experienced stress more often during the pandemic. However, less than half reported feeling new symptoms during the pandemic. This was true for 29.4% of all men and 40.4% of all women. The average number of new symptoms chosen was 2.1, and more than a half reported feeling only 1 new symptom. Here, the coefficient of skewness was 3.59. There was a very big shift to the left towards lower values, meaning that people were more likely to choose less symptoms than more. Now, women on average chose 2.13 new symptoms, while men on average only chose 2. And most frequently chosen were insomnia, which was chosen by 37.5% of all respondents, and chest pain, which was chosen by 22.9% of all respondents. Now, these were chosen regardless of the gender. Now, as for our conclusions, we concluded that psychosomatic symptoms of stress depend upon different density, localization, and expression of TRF between the genders. There was a higher frequency and wider variety of symptoms in women And the most significant difference between the two genders was related to gastrointestinal symptoms, as women were more likely to report them. Women actually were 2 times more likely to report them than men. And the lion's share of respondents mentioned that COVID has had an impact on the frequency and variety of the stress symptoms they feel. The most common new symptoms were chest pain and insomnia. And thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. We will be happy to answer them. That's it.
Thank you to Ms. Rekut and her friend for this work. I would like to invite you, Gabia Razunit, to present their study titled Effect on Sleep Quality of Lithuanian Healthcare Workers During the Covid-19 Pandemic.
Hello everyone, it is a pleasure to be here and present me and my colleagues Kotryna Radkevičiūtė research. We are medical students from Vilnius University, and our research topic is effect on sleep quality of Lithuanian healthcare workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. To begin with, sleeping disorders are one of the biggest health problems in the world. While in the general population, 27% of people do not sleep well, the percentage is even larger between healthcare professionals because 1 out of 2 medics live with sleep disorders. However, with the new global virus, COVID-19, this problem has become even more threatening. During this time, healthcare workers are being called heroes because of their sacrificial work, but being a hero comes with a huge price. Longer working hours, physical and emotional exhaustion, fear to infect others, protection deficiency, a pressure to make the right decision in the eyes of the pandemic. This certainly causes long-term health issues, and one of them is sleeping problems. It is affected not only by stress experienced at work, but also by the growing public anxiety and distrust of the healthcare system. All these factors are contributors to poorer sleep quality and duration, and it can lead to insufficient performance at work and making more mistakes. Seeing problems like this happening all over the world made us realize how important it is to ensure healthcare workers' sleeping health, especially during the time of pandemic. That is why it appeared necessary for us to examine our country's healthcare workers about their sleeping habits, and because by knowing specific Lithuanian situation, we will be able to make further decisions to ensure healthcare workers' good sleep quality and duration. And our study aimed to examine the sleep quality of medical professionals in Lithuania before and during the COVID-19 outbreak and compare the differences. So we conducted a cross-sectional anonymized self-reported survey on Lithuanian healthcare professionals from February 1st to February 16th of 2021. The questionnaire consisted of socio-demographic questions such as age, gender, position at work, as well as questions related to working hours, sleep quality, insomnia, and parasomnia symptoms before and after the COVID-19 outbreak happened. A total of 113 respondents met the inclusion criteria and were involved in our statistical calculations. The statistical analysis was performed using IBM SPSS software, where we applied Pearson's correlation scale and paired t-test methods, and results were considered statistically significant when the p-value was less than 0.05. So moving on to our results. In total, 113 healthcare workers participated in the survey. The biggest part of the interviewed people were physicians. They took up 51%, and nurses took up 30%. Almost half of the participants were working in the COVID frontline. A big part of healthcare workers have been sleeping poorly, and after a night's sleep, just 31% of interviewed people felt fully rested. And also 65% of them said that the quality of sleep changed during the time of pandemic. Significant differences were seen while analyzing working hours before and during the COVID-19 outbreak. 48% of participants were working 40 to 49 hours per week before the pandemic, and during COVID, this percentage decreased by 10%. On the other hand, the number of people that work more than 50 or 60 hours per week increased. Paired t-test was used to determine whether there was a statistically significant difference in working hours or not, and it confirmed that the p-value was less than 0.05. The duration of night sleep got shorter too. 68% of participants were sleeping 7 to 8 hours per night before the pandemic, and now this percentage decreased by 33%. Also, a higher prevalence is seen in sleeping less than 6 hours per night, and 60% of participants sleep 4 to 6 hours. And before the COVID, there was just a quarter of people who took that part. And paired t-test showed strong statistical evidence because the p-value was less than 0.001. To examine the quality of healthcare workers' sleep, we purposely asked them whether they experienced insomnia and parasomnia symptoms before and during the time of the pandemic, and the signs of insomnia were seen in 72% of interviewed people, while before COVID, less than 40% of people experienced it. The most common symptoms that occurred were frequent awakening at night and difficulties to fall asleep. And paired t-test showed strong statistical differences, and the p-value was less than 0.001. The signs of parasomnia were seen in a smaller part of participants, 37%, but before the pandemic, this part was even less than 22% of the interviewed people. The most common signs were referred to as having nightmares, vivid dreams, periodic limb movements, and waking up confused or disoriented. Their t-test results showed that the difference between the means is strongly statistically evident, and the p-value was less than 0.001. To understand whether working in COVID frontline changes sleeping quality or not, a Pearson's correlation test was applied, and the results showed a weak positive correlation between working in the frontline and working hours per week. Also, a weak negative correlation was found among frontline workers and duration of sleep. However, even though frontline healthcare workers are working longer and the duration of sleep is getting shorter, we have not enough evidence to conclude that the difference between frontline workers and higher prevalence to insomnia and parasomnia are statistically significant, so we cannot reject the null hypothesis on this point. So these results show that all healthcare workers, despite working in a frontline or not, experience the same level of sleeping disorders. So all in all, a statistically significant number of participants reported poor sleep quality and more prominent insomnia and parasomnia symptoms during the COVID-19 pandemic. 72% of respondents reported experiencing insomnia symptoms and 37% experienced parasomnia symptoms. No statistical significance was seen when testing for sleep quality differences among healthcare workers who were both involved and not involved in the direct treatment of COVID-19 patients. So our findings demonstrated that all healthcare workers had deterioration in sleep quality, while all participants were similarly vulnerable to sleep disturbance. And this suggests that healthcare workers are indeed prone to experiencing sleep disorders, and therefore their good sleeping quality must not be forgotten. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you can contact us through our emails.
Thank you for your great presentation. Now, this is the last presentation of this section. The last presenter is Paul Dorabat. The title is Burnout Syndrome Among Healthcare Professionals from a Romanian Infectious Diseases Hospital During the COVID-19 Pandemic.
Hello, I'm Paul Dorabat. I'm a sixth-year medical student at the University of Videus Constanța. I will present you the burnout syndrome among healthcare professionals from a Romanian infectious diseases hospital during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Next. Thank you. Burnout is a state of psychological, emotional, and physical stress in response to prolonged exposure to occupational stress. Burnout includes feelings of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced professional accomplishment. Burnout is increasingly being recognized globally as a major concern affecting physical and mental well-being of healthcare workers. Next. Okay, thanks. Traditionally, burnout is considered as a three-dimensional syndrome. As you can see, the three dimensions are reduced personal accomplishment, depersonalization, and emotional exhaustion. Reduced personal accomplishment refers to feelings of decline in one's competence and productivity, and to one's lowered sense of efficacy, representing the self-evaluation component of burnout. Depersonalization, referring to negative, cynical, or excessively detached response to other people at work. And finally, the emotional exhaustion, which refers to feelings of being depleted of one's emotional resources, is regarded as the basic individual stress component of the syndrome. Next one. Next slide, please. Thank you. In context of the new COVID-19 pandemic, burnout syndrome and physical exhaustion have become even more pronounced. Nurses, doctors, and resident doctors seem even more exposed to the higher workload, prolonged exposure, and first contact with patients. Next one. We invited a total of 186 healthcare professionals to fill out a self-administered questionnaire regarding emotional exhaustion, level of tiredness, feeling overwhelmed and burdened, feeling of depression and apathy, level of energy, enthusiasm and fulfillment, disappointments, and work relationship. Next one. So the questionnaire included 25 statements with 5 answer options, with range value from 1 to 5. This table illustrates level score of each burnout dimension and the overall burnout. So the sample of healthcare participants in the study. Study participants, including the healthcare providers from infection diseases hospital of Constanța, who had taken care of COVID-19 patients at any time during the first month of the outbreak. A sample of healthcare professional is composed of nurse practitioners, healthcare assistant, doctors, resident doctors, and other types of hospital occupation. As you can see, most respondents were nurse practitioners. In terms of age, the majority group was between 41 and 50 years, followed by 51 years and 60, and 31, 40. The results overall, out of 186 healthcare providers, 28 had high level of burnout, 87 showed a moderate level of burnout, and 72 respondents reported low level of burnout. In the next slide, I will describe distribution of each burnout level. Lower levels have been described in all professional categories, mainly in nurse practitioners, but also in healthcare assistants and hospital attendants. Next one. Moderate levels are common in nurse practitioners, healthcare assistants, and doctors as well. And high levels of burnout are in nurse practitioners and physicians. Okay. This diagram illustrates how the level of burnout in each subscale varies between different groups of participants. Our study shows that high emotional exhaustion is more common in doctors, resident doctors, and administrative staff. Significantly higher levels of reduced professional equipment is frequent in resident doctors, and the lower levels in medical registrars and hospital attendants as well. Medical registrars, doctors, and nurse practitioners describe higher levels of depersonalization. So this study shows the high prevalence of burnout among healthcare providers during the new pandemic. Most healthcare professionals investigated present moderate or low levels of burnout, and a lot of them are susceptible to burnout syndrome during this pandemic. Mental health is a very important factor that can affect not only the individual but also the care that the patient receives. The mental health impacts of COVID-19 on frontline healthcare workers are undeniable. While physician burnout is not new, the pandemic is rapidly accelerating the many negative repercussions of uncertainty and inadequate support. So health authorities need more information on the magnitude of the problem and its associated factor to prevent burnout among healthcare professionals. Measures like physiotherapy or hiring more staff should be considered. I'll end up this presentation with the quotes, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. If you love what you're doing, you will be successful. And thank you.
Thank you for this valuable presentation. Our section has ended here. Thanks to everyone who participated. We are going to take a 10-minute break now. Then Abdullah Pehlivan will be with you in the last session.